Hey everyone, this is Geeky Vices. I'm J-Belle, and I'm going to be talking about one of my recent bits of fandom or pop culture that I've been into lately. I've been rewatching, big surprise, hearing me say that word, Magi, which is one of my favorite anime I've gotten into. Um, for those of you who don't know about it, Magi uh, basically has three there's two seasons, but they have different names. So like if you're on Netflix, they're gonna have different names. Like they don't just continue from season 1 to season 2. So the first season is Magi, the Labyrinth of Magic, and then the second season is Magi, the Kingdom of Magic. And then there's also a prequel series which has not been dubbed yet. And I will admit, with the original Magi, I've only watched it as dubbed. I've never watched it as sub because I personally don't have any what's the word, prejudices against dubbing, so long as it's done well. Like I don't mind that, and honestly sometimes it's a little bit easier for me to watch the dub because I don't have to be 100% focused. I can be listening while also thinking. Like I can comment on or I can use more of my senses rather than just being entirely a visual based experience. And honestly, sometimes I feel like there's only a few archetypes for Japanese voice actors. Like I don't necessarily always like that. I like that there's a little bit more versatility when it comes to English English voice acting. Not to say I have anything against the Japanese sub versions. It's just this is my preference, especially since dubbing has gotten a lot better than it used to be back in the 90s. But anyways, as I was saying, the first two seasons do have a dubbed version on Netflix, and then the prequel series is The Adventures of Sinbad. So the premise behind Magi is that it's a world with magic, as you might guess from the title. It's kind of like Arabian Nights kind of vibe, where it's like lots of deserty worlds and such. Although there are like definitely oases and sailing, but the main characters are Alibaba, Aladdin, and Morgiana. So Alibaba is this guy who basically just making a living, and he wants to someday make a fortune and basically break out of the lifestyle he has. He's basically just he's like a servant slash henchman for just this guy who's not even the actual local noble. He's like a lackey for the local noble. And this is a world where there's definitely slave trading is definitely a major thing, and there's multiple kingdoms and such. But the thing is that years ago, mysteriously, all throughout the world, these dungeons appeared. Like not some of them were towers, not all of them, but they just appeared, and it was thanks to one of the Magi, which I'll get into. But if you go into the dungeon, you're risking your life. But if you successfully capture the dungeon, you get all this wealth, and also you will get a metal vessel, which will house a genie. So you will have the powers of a genie on your hand. So it's pretty cool, and I do like the genie that we do meet along the way. But yeah, so it's a lot of times and it's also like generally if you become a metal vessel user and you capture in your dungeon capture, it's also believed that you have the potential destiny to become a king. So a lot of times it's very noble people who believe that they're destined to capture this dungeon, such as the local lord when he ends up going into the same dungeon that Alibaba eventually goes into. He also meets this very strange boy named Aladdin, who is he's a little bit pervy, but he's enough a little kid where it's kind of still cute. Like he very much loves women with big boobs, and he'll randomly go up to him. Same as like he doesn't necessarily know normal social boundaries like that. Like he also he'll just start basically motorboating like women if they have big boobs or squeezing them just because he likes boobs. And I don't think it's necessarily a sexual thing for him. I think it's kind of like it's a comfort thing, kind of like not quite motherly, but like it's kind of like just more so like, ooh, this is nice, this feels good, versus it being like, heh heh heh, boobs. But, and he does also, I mean, he will readily admit he likes pretty ladies, but as I said, like, he's young enough where it's still kind of cute rather than being pervy. And there are several times where they will go to brothels, and there is a running gag where if they go into brothels together, like, Aladdin, the cute little kid with blue hair, will be the one surrounded by most of them, and Alibaba, who, he is a good-looking guy, will somehow always get the one woman who works in the brothel who, well, I don't even know for sure if it's a brothel, but, like, it's the red light district. It's, like, a place where they have lady favors type of place. But the woman who's basically, like, his hostess, who's always supposed to be, like, the best hostess, always ends up being this giant woman, very delicate voice, but she has, like, a big nose, and the way that she'll serve them alcohol is, like, she'll use a little hand chop to, like, basically cut off the neck of the bottle. So it's just, like, he's always, it's a running gag, like, no matter where they go. If they go to some place where it's like there's pretty lady favor women, that Alibaba gets that person. But so yeah, they become friends, and they agree to go capture a dungeon. Like, Alibaba's like a little bit reluctant at first, like, befriend Aladdin, because he's just a strange kid, but like he doesn't know how the world works, but he still has this idealistic view of the world. But Alibaba, like, when there's this chance to, like, he will take people just picking on him and, like, chipping his ego and just treating him terribly. But when it comes to other people's, like, lives being put at risk, like these random slaves, he won't stand for it. He'll stand up to people. And so that makes Aladdin really like him and think that he's a very brave person. And then Morgiana, who I adore, she's such a cool character. She is a slave girl that they meet and that they eventually free, but she is part of the Families tribe. So she has very strong, especially in her legs. So she is known, so she's able to be really fast. She's able to jump really high and kick really high, and she's just very powerful. I mean, she's strong overall, but like she's this tiny little girl, like tiny girl, and she's badass. But I also like how I like her character. She's not vain. Like, if people compliment her, she's just kind of taken by surprise because she's not used to it, because she's been a slave pretty much her own life. But she has a strong moral compass, and she's very loyal, and she's very grateful for things, and she's just very capable and kind of like soft-spoken at the same time. And yeah, she's a fun character. Like, I think she'd be great to cosplay if I was willing to actually go barefoot, because I feel like you can't really be a proper Morgiana without the cosplay feet, or without the bare feet. But yeah, and then Aladdin, we find out, is a Magi. And now Magi are very powerful magicians in this world. They're able to use, like, the magic, like in addition to their own huge supply of magic, they're able to just use the ambient magic of them from, like, basically all the spirits in the world, like the Rook. Like, basically, it's kind of a complicated thing. Like, they're kind of like spirits. They're kind of fate. They're kind of a whole bunch of things. But but basically, there's only supposed to be 3 Magi, but there's already been 3 Magi, so he's actually the 4th one to appear, even though, like, it's always historically been only 3. And the Magi are supposed to be powerful magicians who choose king's candidates, so they choose people who will be king and kind of guide and lead them. And the thing is that we find out later on that one of them basically, I believe it was Yunnan, basically, like, has been just making the dungeon appear, but he's kind of just a wanderer. He hasn't really picked his own king's candidate. The female Magi, she's really old, but she's been basically just been hanging out in this one kingdom and basically just showing her favoritism to that one kingdom. But she's basically just, like, been happy living in her own little bubble. And then there's Judar, who has been corrupted by this organization who basically who wants people to curse their fates and, quote unquote, fall into darkness by cursing their fate, and basically have their Rook, like, as I said, the spirits, everything, like, this magical source, just this ambient thing, fate, whatever it's called. Like, he wants the Rook to turn black. Like, the organization, which is literally a lot of times frequently called the organization. But yeah, so, and the thing is that when people, they basically, instead of, like, letting the world move forward, they just basically want to stop its progression. And so there are a lot of times like we'll be, excuse me, orchestrating things like the fact that there is more wars, the fact that there are slaves, and like basically setting people up to fail or hate their lives. That way they'll fall and curse destiny because they think that destiny limits our freedoms because it's something that's already set out before us and I don't get that. I mean personally it's one of those like villain doctrines that's a little hard for me to an intellectual understand, but hey, it works great for it just being this evil organization. And they anyways, but the last Magi, Judar, they had basically corrupted him when he was a child. So that way, like killed his family when he was like super young, and made it so his Rook turned black. So it's supposed to be someone who's supposed to be helping to bring the world forward. He's actually really powerful and like and basically like trying to bring the worlds backwards. And the thing is that Judar has been really prolific with his king's candidates. He has chosen, he's chosen 3 brothers from the Ko Empire. Like they're basically like the main 3 brothers, like the main princes of Ko Empire. Basically their half sister or adopted sister. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's her stepsister from basically the previous king. But, like, basically her mom was the queen and married the new king. So, that's Hawkaway. And then, there's another, like, distant, like, bastard princess, Ren of the Ko Empire? I can't remember her name. There's so many names and they sound so similar. But yeah, she's, like, another one. She ends up falling in love with Sinbad, who I'll get into in a moment. And then, the last one who he's pushing for, who has, at the beginning of the series, hadn't had to capture the dungeon yet, but it's Hawkaroo, who is Hawkaway's younger brother. And he becomes a major character and goes through some major changes. But anyways, so the world is, like, the first season is mostly about them capturing, like, them going into dungeons and also, like, them kind of reuniting after getting separated. And finding out that Alibaba is actually the bastard child of the king of Balbad, and he's actually was the king's preferred heir. But he ran away from all that, and he's basically helping to start a revolution in the city with like by making the coup trying to be about like being honorable thieves, when his best friend is really just wants to cause destruction, like just wants to cause destruction and such, and basically is being manipulated by the organization. So that's his best friend Kasim. That's like a major arc, and we eventually meet Sinbad, who is awesome, and I hope he's everything he seems to be, but I suspect he's not because the fact that none of the Magi have chosen him as their king's candidate. So really briefly, Sinbad is this guy who we know has lots of Magoi, which is the magical energy inside of you. So he's very powerful, and he's captured 7 dungeons on his own. And so with each of his dungeons, he also has a corresponding household metal vessel user. So he's a metal vessel user. There's also household vessel users who basically are connected, who basically draw their power from him and are loyal to him. But they have their own abilities, and they just have to have a metal item. But basically, like, he has 7 of them corresponding to each one of the dungeons he's captured, and the gene he's basically made deals with. So he's very much should be a king's candidate, and then his 8th general is just a magician, because magicians and dungeons don't really go well together. And so he has all these great powers, and the thing is that he did all this without having a Magi to back him, which is not supposed to happen. So he, in his lifetime, created his own kingdom, Sindria, which honestly, I keep on saying if I was going to live in a fantasy world, I'd want to live specifically in Sindria, because it just seems like it's a happy, romanticized, magical world where like people are treated well and you don't have to worry about starvation and you have a good king and everything. And like, I would love to live in Sindria. But yeah, anyways, so Alibaba, the way he tries saving his kingdom from the co-empire, who I mentioned, like Judar is heavily involved with, and he has 5, soon to be 6 king's candidates. He basically decides to destroy the monarchy and make it a republic, and to try to dissolve it, getting rid of all their debt, which the organization helped orchestrate. And the thing is that eventually, like, the co-empire is like, yeah, we're not gonna let this happen. So Sinbad knocks him unconscious after all this other drama happens, and takes him to Sindria. And then the last part of the first season is them in Sindria, and then second season there's a little bit of adventures of them together, along with Hakuyu, who you'll have to watch the series to get to know him better, because he's interesting and has understandably is a very complicated character. But anyways, second season is all about them going on their separate adventures. So Morgiana made a promise to the person who helped her break being a slave to go to her homeland, the Dark Continent. So that's her story arc. Aladdin's story arc is going to this one kingdom to control his Magoi, so that way he can use his gene equip abilities better. Like, that's what's referred to when you tap into the power of the genie thing to deal with, is you gene equip, and the best power is if you can do a full gene equip, where you're basically fully encompassed by the gene. And then Aladdin's story arc is going to this country that is ruled by magicians, and he basically studying magic, and that's the bulk of the series, honestly. And eventually, like, there ends up being like there's this big conflict at the end, but that's basically the big gist of the. Anyways, I've watched the series several times. I just finished watching the first season again because it's one of my happy shows. Like, I love rewatching it. It's so well done. I like worlds where, like, the magic is super incorporated into a world rather than being this separate entity, or it's like being super rare. And I found the concept of Magistadt, a city run by magicians, interesting, especially since they had good reason to want a magician nation, because they basically were treated horribly and, like, were dying because of how they were treated. But then on the flip side, they then became tyrants over the non-magicians, the Goi, if I remember what they call them. And I did mention that there was another spin-off prequel, and that's just about Sinbad's childhood and him starting to get doing all his dungeon capturing, like getting his different powers and meeting his different generals. And where that left off was only after he'd met, like, his third or fourth one of his generals, I would say. Fourth or fifth one, I can't remember. But yeah, I highly recommend the series. It's fun. It's heavy at times. Like, it's not just like a lighthearted little thing. It's definitely, like, heavy at times. Like, there are characters who die, but it's not gory or anything. But yeah, and as I said, like, the world's not perfect. Like, the fact that, as I said, there is slave traders, but on the flip side, like, some animes that go dark, like, it'll be rapey, and thankfully it never goes into a rapey direction, so feel good about that. Even though, yes, slavery is bad, but that's a direction I'm glad it doesn't go into. And yeah, if you like Magi, or other series I'd recommend would be Fairy Tail. It was a really great one. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Until next time, continue watching your own geeky vices.